Welcome to The Conflict Coach with Dr. Emily Taylor. I'm a mediator, developmental psychologist, and married mother of 5. I also teach conflict resolution classes. And like you, I've dealt with a lot of conflict in my own life. And I used to think I could make it all go away if I improved conditions or changed myself. But I've realized that conflict is just part of life. We all need more effective tools to handle it with confidence. So that's what this podcast is about. Each episode, you'll hear me coach a real person through a real conflict in their life. As you listen, you'll notice that I'm not telling them what to do. I'm giving them a set of skills that can apply to any conflict, including the ones in your life. So let's get started. I'm joined today by Logan. He's 35. He's a homeowner. He and his family live in a suburban neighborhood. He's got an ongoing conflict over street parking with a neighbor. It's the kind of conflict that a lot of us may have living in communities where our lives are tied together by proximity, but we don't necessarily have much in common otherwise. So Logan, thanks for joining me today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Can you give me a little bit of context to what's been going on and maybe how long?
For sure. So it's actually not our next door neighbor, but our neighbor's neighbor. So they're one house is separating us and this neighbor that we're having a dispute with. You know, it started probably several months ago. We're at the end of a cul-de-sac. We have inherited a truck from my late father-in-law that we're still trying to figure out what to do with it, whether to sell it, whether to keep it for my wife's sisters. And so a couple months ago, we had talked to another neighbor in our neighborhood that is down the street a little bit where the street is more straight. We talked to them and asked if it would be okay if we could park our truck in front of their house for a little bit. And they agreed to it and said it was fine. But the neighbor that's having the problem is next door to this other neighbor that said it was okay to park in front of their house on the street. And they're the ones who are having the problems with it. So that happened a little while ago. They asked us to move the truck. Said, yeah, totally, that's fine. You know, we'll try to find a different place for it. We were able to park it at one of my sister-in-law's place for a little bit, and then they needed us to move the truck again. So we've kind of become the place for the truck to be for the moment. And everyone else in our neighborhood seems to be okay with it.
Can you tell me a little bit about this truck? Is it like unusual looking? Is it big?
It's an older truck, I guess. I think it's a GMC Sierra, probably in the 90s. It's, you know, got some paint wear on it. It's not a pretty truck by any means.
Yeah, I didn't mean to be leading in that way. I just wondered, you know, is it the kind of thing that's not very good looking or like that people like to look at?
It's funny that you say that because that was an assumption that I have. I've asked this neighbor several times trying to come to understanding what the problem is with the truck or with us being on the road, and he's never been really straightforward with me about the issue.
I'm kind of sensing too that you don't necessarily want it there either. Is that true?
That is true. Yes. It's one of those situations that I don't know if I really want to say this out loud, but if I had it my way, we would probably just sell the truck. But I know that my father-in-law just passed away. And so right now for my wife and for her sisters, she's the youngest of 8 girls. I don't think that they're willing to make a decision on the truck yet because it was their dad's.
Okay. So it's a symbol of kind of the emotional attachment to their dad, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's always interesting too, like in a conflict, pulling apart like what the symbols mean. And it sounds like maybe you in your position as an in-law, maybe that truck doesn't mean that to you, but you know that your wife and your sisters-in-law, that it has like sentimental value, right?
Yeah,
even though it's not, as you say, a very attractive truck per se.
I don't necessarily mind that. I have older vehicles as well. I just don't know if I love being the one responsible for it.
Yeah.
Right
Are you right now, basically, if somebody else doesn't want it, are you personally responsible for that truck?
That's how it feels, for sure. I don't actually know if that's the case. It hasn't been like something that has been explicitly discussed within the sisters.
But you're playing that role right now, at least.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's always tricky, too, being like an intermediary in a conflict, and it sounds like a little bit that may be the case.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to you communicating with a neighbor that doesn't like it. How did originally that kind of come about? Was that like a face-to-face conversation?
It was through text.
Okay.
And I don't love that because I read the text. I was like, okay.
Do you
like,
remember what kind of like how it was phrased or?
Well, the first text was pretty nice. I don't know. I say pretty nice. I think I'm defending my neighbor a little too much. There's a lot of demands on it and not a lot of requests. And I think that rubbed me the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like if I had the relationship with him, or even if he just approached the situation and asked, I would be more willing to move the truck than I feel like I am, because he approached it with, I need you to move the truck. If it's not moved, I'll call the police and parking enforcement. And so there was an immediate threat kind of connected with the quote unquote request, which definitely rubbed me the wrong way. And I felt like, oh, okay, like if we need to move the truck, we can move the truck. But I wish, there would have been better communication.
Is this a neighbor you know at all?
I mean, yeah, I would say so. So we're in a religious place. We're all in the same ward. He and I were actually in a calling together where we taught the youth. Okay. So I know him decently well, where we saw each other every Sunday.
So same congregation, someone you actually worked with, like you're interacting, but maybe not a lot, or?
Right, yeah.
Okay, not deeply.
Right, exactly.
Okay. What's your understanding of even like, what are there, is there an HOA? Are there?
No HOA. When I got that text, I was like, okay, like if he's going to call the police or parking enforcement, I felt like I wanted to get ahead of it. Okay. So I went down to the police department and I went and talked to an officer over parking enforcement and just explained the situation. This is where our truck is. I have a neighbor who's threatening to call the police, but I want to know, like, what are the city ordinances and laws regarding parking on the street? And I ultimately got to the end of that conversation with the officer, and he told me I was fine to park there. And so I think I felt justified because I had gone to the quote unquote the law about it. And then I went back to talk to my neighbor about it.
So you actually like went over to his house?
I feel like I'm kind of a little maybe too confrontational with that, but I went and I knocked on his door, no answer. So then I called him on the phone and I talked to him over the phone about it, and he got upset with me because he said, well, the police aren't following the law then, and I'm going to call them tomorrow and ask why they're not following the law. He told me I was bullying him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was like, this is really uncomfortable, you calling me and talking to me on the phone, and I feel like you're bullying me to get your way. And I don't feel like I normally talk that way to people. Mm-hmm. I don't know. He went on to say that we had a lot of other neighbors in the neighborhood that had a problem with the truck. And so I asked him, like, I would love to hear from them if they had a problem with it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I ended up going door to door and talking to all my other neighbors about it, all of which said that they were fine and that they had never said that. And so they didn't know where this one neighbor was coming from. And I didn't mean for it to become like this big conflict, but I wanted our neighborhood to have this cohesive feeling about it, And I guess I feel more comfortable talking with people face to face and going and knocking on doors. But I don't know. I understand that me going door to door and talking to all my neighbors is something that no one does. So
it's pretty unusual.
Today's society. I maybe they do, but I assume they don't.
Okay, listeners, this first part of any conflict coaching session is the trickiest because it seems like we're going in circles, but in fact, we're doing something that we sometimes call emptying the closet. And that means we're unraveling all the details and the facts of the case and trying to understand what a cohesive narrative could be for this particular conflict. In this case, I'm looking not only for the interest that Logan has in the situation, meaning the things that he's wanting or needing or that he experienced, but I'm also trying to assume the position of the other person in the conflict and see if there might be motivations that haven't been addressed in the current narrative. So let's get back to the session. I suspect there may be some gaps in the narrative, which if we fill in, the conflict will make a lot more sense and we can really do some work with it. It sounds like from your perspective, like you've had these accusations 2 different times, right? Once for, via the text, and then the next when you're following up, to actually go talk to him in person. But each time you've received a lot of defensiveness and an unwillingness. I'm going to call the police. And actually in neighborhoods, that's pretty common. I don't know if you're, aware of this, even like with like barking dogs. It's common across the US. I've, mediated cases where people will call the police rather than even talk to their neighbor first. Mm-hmm. But again, when it's like a group problem, how do you address it if there's no HOA or there's no like kind of person in charge? And I think that's why a lot of times people do go to the police, because it's like seen like there's someone who can tell us what's right and what's wrong. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to like work it out otherwise. Where are things right now? You've gone around to the neighborhood, you've talked with people and kind of, it sounds like gathered the idea that most people are not against this truck. Mm-hmm. And you've had the truck coming and going a little bit, right? Has it been 2 times it's been taken out and then it comes back?
Yeah, I think there's been one additional time, but it was only over a weekend.
Okay. Is it also indefinite? Is there a plan for the truck?
As of right now, I don't know if there is a plan. And I know that was one of the concerns that my neighbor brought up. Was he asked me, well, how long is it going to be here for? And I told him I didn't know. And he was like, well, is it going to be for a year? Are you going to keep it here for 10 years? And I was like, I feel like that's a little like, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I felt like it was like kind of a weird exaggeration, like hyperbole to be like, well, it's just going to be here for like 20 years or 10 years or however. And I told him I'm going to try to figure it out as soon as I can. But to your question, like, how has it been since all of that? I don't know. I did ask another neighbor in the neighborhood if it would be okay for me to move the truck over there, since it seemed to be a problem in this one spot. And he said, yeah, that'd be fine.
Oh, you mean in a different part of the neighborhood?
Yeah, so it's just, it's literally just across the street from this neighbor who has a problem with it, but just not in front of their house. And I haven't heard a thing since I moved the truck. So it's one of those things where I'm like, I just want to make a decision to help peace be in the community.
Sure.
But I also kind of felt like maybe I'm just rolling over right now to make a change to, not inconvenience this one neighbor.
Am I hearing you felt bullied?
I don't think I felt bullied. I didn't feel like pressured to move the truck because of the fear of ramifications of what he might do. I moved the truck because I got a feeling that other neighbors were also frustrated with this one neighbor making accusations that they had problems with it. And so to make the community that I live in a little more peaceful, I thought I'll just move the truck in front of another willing neighbor's house that I could, talk to and have a better relationship with. And hopefully that will be enough.
So as it stands now, you're not hearing from this neighbor anymore. It's not right near his property. So that stress is alleviated.
I hope so. He hasn't talked to me about it. So I'm just going to assume things are fine unless someone communicates something else with me.
Okay. If you rewound this whole thing, would you do anything differently?
I don't know. I feel like, would I have still wanted to have the conversation with my neighbor? Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I feel like the lack of communication, or just communicating through texts with all of the misinterpreting of nuance and communication and conversation, I don't like that method. I would rather have conversations, with people face to face. Would I have done it differently? Maybe. Yeah, I do think that I probably caught people off guard just by going and knocking on their doors. I think I'd probably change that. Maybe ask like, hey, if you have time, I would love to chat with you about these things, or I don't know.
So listener, here's the thing. Sometimes how you say something is just as important or more important than what you say. So if someone's trying to communicate with you at their comfort level of, say, sending a text or calling, it can be really helpful to mirror or do what they prefer back to them, meaning send a text, respond with a text. And then there's also, we should consider face-saving needs. That just means make sure they don't feel awkward or weird when you're trying to communicate with them. Say, to confront a neighbor on their doorstep when you don't really know them very well, that could be really difficult for them. Everybody has the need to have dignity and feel like they're kind of in control of a situation. So let's get back to Logan's situation and see what the next steps are. Lots of neighborhoods have these issues, right? Like there's no HOA. It's not an illegal thing. It's more like an annoying thing for one party or the other. I think what's interesting in this one is that the person won't say why they want it gone. I wondered if we could think just for a second, if you we can give him a pseudonym if you want.
Sure.
Can we call him Tom?
Let's call him Tom. Yeah, absolutely.
Imagine you're Tom. Tom, why do you care so much? What's bothering you about having this truck outside your house?
Sorry, there's a lot of dead air right now. That's such a hard thing for me because I think because being in the cul-de-sac, I do have a neighbor right now, like my direct next door neighbor, that has a teenager that parks their car on the sidewalk space in front of my house. Mm-hmm. And that, I guess, has never bothered me. And it's probably because I have a good relationship with this neighbor. And I've interacted with their teenage son a lot, and he seems like a good kid. And that relationship probably softens the fact that I miss out on some of the street parking that I could have.
Okay.
And so that's, I guess, the first thing that comes to my mind is that maybe for him, there is like a loss of that space. Even if it's not directly in front of his house, it is a spot where maybe his kids could park when they come to visit.
I'm sensing it's a little bit tricky to try to imagine what his reasoning is. Like, I was wondering if we could just even brainstorm, like, what could be all the possible reasons why he would be annoyed. Again, not seeking to justify him, but just to understand him. Tom, that we'll call him.
Right.
So, I mean, again, one could be like space for his own family to use the parking. Any other things you can think of that would be like, that's why it would be annoying?
I mean, definitely the appearance of the car could be a reason, it being an older car. It could be that we, I guess, are relatively new to the cul-de-sac, the neighborhood.
How would that affect it if you were new?
It could just be, I think, when you get new people into any kind of group or situation that don't know the unspoken rules, quote unquote. There's like a culture that might be unspoken, and we might be violating that.
Has any other neighbor parked like a vehicle like you have along that street? Like, does that seem like it actually is a norm?
No, I don't think so. I feel like nobody parks where I parked the truck initially, and that's kind of why I chose it, was because no one had really ever parked there before. But just like the neighbor's house who I parked in front of, Tom's neighbor, he was fine with it, and he parks his car on the street in front of his house.
Interestingly.
And so
I wonder if that's also irritating to this neighbor.
Be, right? Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. It's not like Tom hasn't given me any reasons. He told me initially it was because that it was blocking the view down the street and it was harder to back out. And so I think that could be something. Okay. But I guess the reason why I don't necessarily like buy that is because he then said, well, it's illegal to park on the street. And to his point, or to his credit, there is an ordinance that a car can't be parked on the street for over 72 hours without being moved. And I didn't know about that before I had gone and talked to the police officer. And so we've done our best to move it every, couple of days, and then use it and then come back and park it. But But that, like, backing out, how did that come across to you? That he did. I mean, that one felt genuine in the moment, and so I was like, yeah, like, I understand that. We can try to move the truck, Okay. That was initial, like, months ago. And then when we had to move it back, instead of, I assumed if that was really the reason, he would have come back and said, hey, we had talked about this before. It's hard to back out. when the truck is there, could you move it? But instead, the text I got that time was, well, it's illegal for you to park here. I'm going to call the police tomorrow unless it's moved. And so I felt like, well, is it really an issue that you can't see when you're backing out, or are you just annoyed that it's there and now we're reaching for a different justification to make the demand?
So it sounds like that initial conversation, and this is interesting. This is kind of like going into the layers because we're having, I mean, a lot of times we see these disputes as just like, especially in neighborhoods where like we just want it to go away, right? Like Tom just wants the car gone. It sounds like you might even want the car gone.
Sure.
But it's like the repetitive nature, like it's over time, like it keeps coming back. But I think what's interesting in this conversation is even going back to that first conversation, that there was a reason given, right, that seemed somewhat legitimate to you, that like not being able to see when backing up. Like, so it sounded like I'm just gauging from the conversation that for you that was like somewhat legitimate.
It seems like it.
Yeah. But you were hoping that he would actually come to you if the truck appeared again, and then just kindly ask you to move the truck so he could, see when he's pulling out. Is that?
Yeah. I that's what I would have hoped for.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So, and it sounds like that's probably what you would have done, kind of like, that's a neighborly expectation, right? Mm-hmm. Instead, it became a threat. And that's when it sounds like you're like, hey.
Right, yeah.
I'm not going to take being threatened.
No, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think
Okay.
I've responded with that sentimentality of like, okay, like that's not, okay, I feel like it's healthy to have, boundaries with the people that you have relationships with, even if they are just neighbors that you don't really talk to.
So listener, this is a really interesting skill that I want us to think about. It's called challenging the narrative. So each of us see the world in a certain way, and we create a story about what's happened to us to make sense of the world. Sometimes these narratives get reinforced after telling and retelling the same story many times. So one thing that we can do is when we have a narrative that's become very simplified and it's really focused just on the facts that put us in a good light, we need to challenge them to be able to see the conflict from other people's perspectives. So that means we ask our questions like, am I missing something? What would be a legit reason for this person to think this way? So there's just a way for us to widen our scope and incorporate all the main facts of the situation, so we're not just supporting whatever our position is. As I've been talking to Logan, you may have noticed that the narrative has changed slightly. Pieces of the story that now create kind of a different telling. That all can impact how Logan chooses to resolve this conflict. Let's get back to the session. Have you interacted with this person anymore?
Really, no. I feel like I'm being avoided in a lot of ways. I feel like my life is very kind of loud right now. I've got 4 kids under the age of 8, and so they are riding their bikes all over. I'm running after them down the cul-de-sac to get them to come back in for dinner and whatever. Okay. And so I see them often and might make a wave or make eye contact, and I feel like I don't get anything in return. And to a certain point, I am not too overly hurt by that. I think that's fine. Okay. If they want a relationship with me, I feel like I'm trying to remain open enough that they could have one. But if not, I'm not overly hurt.
Okay, so you're not invested in trying to work on the relationship, but if there was if Tom made an overture to you, you might be receptive.
Yeah. I feel like I there's enough reciprocity there that I would want to repair a relationship if they wanted it. At the same time, this is an excuse, but I don't feel like I have the energy right now to go over and try to make the repair on my own initiative. I think another thing that bothers me about it is I tried to, appeal to some compassion and say, this is, my wife's father's truck, and I can't just sell it or get rid of it right now. So I'm just trying to find the best place for it. I'd hope that there could be some compassion. She just lost her father, a couple months ago. To which he responded with, well, you need to have compassion for the rest of the neighbors that you're bothering right now. Okay. And so that really, I think for me, the decent human reaction to that would have been, yeah, it really stinks to lose a father. And, I would hope that he would have had some sort of compassionate response towards my wife, or even, me in that instance as being kind of like a substitute for her in that interaction.
So if there was like you wish for an apology
Right,
to even
yeah.
like repair some relationship damage.
Yeah, I think so. But like, I do realize that that's something that like I have created this scenario in my own mind. And for him, he might not even be thinking about it at all. And so he doesn't know what my expectations are.
What I think is interesting, even actually just in the talking through the conflict, Logan, something I noticed was we have a narrative, and I don't mean this in any disrespect at all, but it is interesting as we've gone along in our conversation. I've gathered more information about each of those encounters. So say, for example, like when we first started talking, it was a text and it was like a demand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting, a little while after we talked, then I learned a little bit more about there was a demand and then there was also a concern that he brought to you, right? We don't know exactly, we're just guessing. But the one thing that he did say is that, he can't see when he's backing up. It could be a lot of other things. He could actually be representing someone else, right?
Right.
We don't know. Maybe it's his wife that's complaining every day about that truck and she doesn't like what it looks like or whatever. And then he's trying to defend her. We don't know. But I think it's interesting, again, the story that we've told and then kind of what we hope to have the other person do to repair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's fair to hope that people would treat us with the same way that we would try to, treat them, that kind of reciprocity, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
What I do think is interesting, especially in just thinking about American neighborhoods these days, and again, the busyness of life. Like you're saying, I'm going down the street, I'm like chasing people and my kids, trying to herd them back in. So you're busy, and then you're managing not only your own immediate family, but you're also managing your extended family. And I just noticed that as I move into like kind of more the middle age part of my life,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm in between, and I'm trying to keep family members happy. I'm trying to have some connection with my neighbors, but a lot of times we're actually not we don't have as much like a reservoir of relationship with people who do affect our lives a lot, and they're living really close to us. So again, kind of the conflict prevent of building relationships with those around us. So when something comes up that we disagree with, you actually, you can talk through it. And then I think another key point is the method of communication. He texted me in the beginning. Maybe he's a texting guy, even though I don't believe in texting,
Right.
especially for something like that. Maybe this is a person that needs a little time to think before they are kind of put on the spot.
Yeah, I think it was once explained to me while I was working at a treatment center with youth, mm-hmm. that if you're going to make a demand on the relationship, first you need to make deposits into the relationship.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a bank account, right?
Yes.
I probably tried to make a withdrawal that didn't have enough deposited into mm-hmm. the relationship. And then in regards to communication styles, I do think that it is what's most comfortable for me is going and talking to people face to face. But like you said, like in a conflict rich setting right now, it could be that he does not like that and that is uncomfortable for him. Mm-hmm. And I've been inconsiderate of that for sure.
Logan, I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you.
I know it's not easy to talk through, conflicts, and this one in some sense is single focus, the truck, but then there's other facets to it. But I definitely think you can do it. You obviously have a way of being open and reaching out to people and trying to resolve it as best you can. And I appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Okay, friends, Logan was so open and honest with us, and that gave us a view into kind of the ins and outs of a conflict in a neighborhood. And we're never going to do everything perfectly, but there are some skills that I'd love to recap with you that we touched on today to put to work in your own conflicts. One is to be very thoughtful about the method you're using to communicate with the other person. Consider their level of comfort with whatever they choose. Second thing is challenge your narrative. Especially if you're having a hard time putting yourself in their shoes, you may need to try to role play with a trusted friend, push against a little bit the story that you've been telling or retelling to others. That will help you come up with further options to how to actually resolve the conflict. Finally, I want you to consider that sometimes détente may be good enough. Détente just means that the conflict isn't fully resolved. Logan's truck was moved, but it wasn't fully removed from the neighborhood. It's actually still visible to that neighbor. So in this case, détente may make a lot of sense, especially when the other person won't engage with us in a constructive way. Sometimes it also can be that we don't have a close enough relationship to do that collaborative work. On the flip side, choosing détente in our most important relationships with really important issues, it may actually make the problem worse. It may cause the relationship to stagnate, divide, and even implode. So it's a legitimate choice. It has pros and cons. So just something to consider when you're choosing to not fully resolve the conflict or you're not able to do so. Thanks for joining me today. If there's someone in your life who might benefit from listening to this episode, please share it. Because as I always say, it's not a question of if, but when we're going to experience conflict. And we do much better when we're prepared. The Conflict Coach with Dr. Emily Taylor is a BYU radio podcast. Check the show notes to see how we can connect on social media. And next time, I'll be coaching someone through a housing conflict. I hope you'll join me.